Welcome, cellar dwellers, to the Matthew Street channel. I am your host, Matthew Street, and I really appreciate you being here live from the cavern in my parents' basement. Folks, I really think you're going to enjoy this video because I'm going to be talking about a great band that I love and a genre of music that I don't think I've talked about that often on the Matthew Street channel, but I'm going to rectify that today, folks. Now, you know how much I love the Beatles, Elvis, Buddy Holly, the rock and roll pioneers. You know how much I love 60s rock and roll. I love 70s rock and roll. Power pop. If you've watched my channel, you know what a power pop fanatic I am. But what about heavy metal? What about that heavy rock and roll? Well, folks, I'm here to give you a resounding yes. I love heavy metal. I love heavy rock and roll. If done right, by the right type of artist, I am really into it, folks. I truly, truly am. This goes back to when I was a teenager back in the mid to late 70s. And then coming into the late 70s, I went into the Air Force, as you know, and I was stationed overseas for 2 years in the United Kingdom and met my friend Chris, who was my roommate, my buddy, my best friend. And to this day, there's a picture of us back here in our dorm room. He is still a close friend of mine, and he definitely broadened my horizons when it came to heavy rock and heavy metal. I'm talking stuff like listening to Judas Priest and Blackfoot and the Scorpions and Kiss, among so many others. And to this day in my collection, I couldn't bring everything out that I love, but folks, I love stuff like The Cult, classics like Aerosmith, Def Leppard, Eagles of Death Metal, Guns N' Roses, Ted Nugent, certainly Led Zeppelin, UFO, one of the best live albums ever right here, Van Halen, all the way, and AC/DC. Me and Chris, my buddy, commiserated over AC/DC for those 2 years we were together in the Air Force overseas. We saw them in London on the Back in Black tour. Folks, I am into heavy metal, heavy rock and roll. And then you got like newer kind of semi-parody bands like Steel Panther. I don't know if anyone's into them out there, but you gotta have a really a tough, thick skin to listen to their music, let me tell you. Those of you that heard it know what I'm talking about. But anyway, folks, rock and roll was kind of dead. Let's face it, when I say that, it was probably in the early 2000s, I should clarify. Early 2000s or so, after the 80s and 90s went by, and we had been through that grunge era that happened in the 90s. Some of the heavy rock and roll or heavy metal, whatever you want to call it, after the hair metal was over from the 80s, grunge was over from the 90s, we're coming into the early 2000s, and there really wasn't that fun, melodic, hook-filled, heavy rock and roll, heavy metal that I love so much. The heavy rock and roll at that time in the early 2000s was crapola, in my opinion, okay? Very dour, very dark, very depressing, not fun, boring, in my opinion. Okay, and I'm not even going to name the bands here that were, from that era because I don't want to insult anybody. I know there may be many of you that are fans of that type of music, but not me. But that all changed for me in 2003 when the latest thing happened. And folks, it was a song I heard called I Believe in a Thing Called Love by The Darkness. And it was on this album right here, Permission to Land, in 2003. Folks, I said, what is this? What is that song? I Believe in a Thing Called Love. It is so catchy. It is so fun. I said, who is this? What is it? I need it, and I love it. So even my two sons at the time this album came out, one of them was 13 years old and one of them was 16 years old at the time. They were into this album. They were even into this band because it was something new and fresh for them that they loved. This brought me back to the kind of music I love from the 70s and the heavy rock I love from my younger days. And I said, wow, this Permission to Land is a fun, great album. It's melodic. It's heavy. It has fun hooks. It's got great playing. It's got fab singing. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's still kind of serious rock and roll. It's rocking hard. And you know what? These guys aren't taking themselves too seriously like some of the heavy rock bands just previous to them were. I said, this is just fun and heavy, and I became a fan, folks. I thought this was great. One of the greatest, fun, hard-rocking metal albums I had heard in the longest time. Instant fan for me. Now, it showed so much promise because Permission to Land was such a great album. And I will say, 2 years later in 2005, when their second album, One Way Ticket to Hell and Back, came out, a little more polished, a little more produced, but no less fun and great. I love this album as well. And it was produced by the famous Roy Thomas Baker, who had produced Queen for several years. And the Darkness were heavily influenced by Queen. It was one of their favorite artists and bands of all time. Now, after this album came out, the band had some personal internal problems, kind of imploded a little bit. And I thought, or so we thought, they were done. Because after this album, they kind of faded off into the sunset, and we didn't really hear much more about them. Now, this band was influenced by so many great artists, from the Beatles to Thin Lizzy to Queen to AC/DC to A Dash of Cheap Trick. You know, throw all these different influences in there, but they were just so fun and original, even with those influences. They just made it their own and was so special, such great rock and roll, that I was sad after 2005 and the second album when they kind of broke up and faded away. It was a bummer, okay? That's all I'm going to say, because I really enjoyed. This was a new, fresh band that, for me, I thought I was going to be into for a long time. And when that happened, I said, oh, what a shame. But they weren't done yet, folks. A couple of the band members got their acts together, cleaned up their act, so to speak, got motivated again, got inspired. That spirit, that fire came back into the band. And in 2012, so you're talking like 7 years later, they stripped it all down, went back to the basics of that first album, Permission to Land, and in 2012, they came back with the album Hotcakes. Again, a stripped-down album, back to the basic rock and roll, heavy metal rock and roll, but no less fun, folks. A great, great album, and I loved it. I loved it. Great, great stuff. And in case I didn't show you the back of the first one, the second one, and here's the back of Hotcakes, the third one in 2012. I loved it, folks. I was just so happy to see them back and rocking, and I even had a great opportunity to see them on this tour with my two sons in Boston. We had a fabulous time. Okay, so then a few years go by, and then in 2015, they put out an album called Last of Our Kind, which is right here. Now, this was heavy stuff. More like I said, this was stripped back to basics. This one got a little more produced, a little heavier. This is closest I've seen them get to real heavy metal. I mean, this is all out rock and roll. Some people, though, for some reason, were not into this album as much as the comeback album, Hotcakes. For some reason, Last of Our Kind, some people, it didn't resonate with them. And I don't understand why, because I love the melodies on this album. It has hooks galore here, and I loved it. I just think this is a great, great addition to their catalog. But it kind of continued a little bit of like people weren't into it as much. There's a lot of people that do not like this album. I happen to really like it. After that album came out, though, they came out with an album in 2017 called Pinewood Smile. Now, by this point, I had faded a little bit away from the Darkness, so I didn't get Pinewood Smile. And it's not well liked by some of the fans. It's considered one of their least, out of their 7 studio albums, it's considered near the bottom somewhere by a lot. Now, I've only heard the album once or twice, sampling it online, and it didn't resonate with me right away, so I never purchased it, and I don't have it. I'm thinking of giving it another chance, and that will probably happen soon. Now, in 2019, they released Easter is Canceled, which caused a little bit of controversy with some people, but if you really understand what the whole message of the album is about, it's not what you think. It's not as bad as you think. But fans didn't seem to gravitate towards it. I don't have it, and it's supposed to be a little better than Pinewood Smile, but I haven't picked it up yet. I think I only sampled it once or so online, and I still, again, like Pinewood Smile, I need to give it another chance, and I intend to do so. And you might be saying, well, Matt, why if you haven't bought those two albums and you only sampled them and didn't really resonate with you, why are you going to give them a second chance and really try this time? Well, folks, because, it went for a period there after 2019 or so where I said, oh, maybe they're out of gas. Maybe there's no more gas left in the tank of the darkness. Maybe they're fading. Maybe, their time is coming and that's it. But no. A couple of months ago, November 2021, a major return to form for the darkness with the album, brand new one, just out a few weeks now, Motorheart. Or as we say here in the Boston area, Motorheart. Okay, so we got the darkness, Motorheart. All right? Anyway, folks, this returned to all the elements. I love it. Look at me. I'm losing my voice. This returned them to all the elements, all the joy, the power, the glory that I loved about this band is on this album. Motorheart. Melodies, hooks, heavy metal power pop, I want to call it. Mega fun. It's produced so well. It's hard rock bliss, folks. This is great, great album. Here's the back. Here's the inside. Now, on the regular album, if you just get the regular album, you're only getting 9 cuts. So you want to get the deluxe edition, folks, because you get 12. You get 3 extra cuts on this edition. You're getting 12 songs total on the deluxe version, and that's the one I highly recommend on this. Folks, the musicianship on this album is amazing. Justin Hawkins, the lead singer, and let me say I'm going to go through all the different members here. Justin Hawkins on guitar and lead vocals. He's absolutely amazing. He sounds as great on this album as he did back in 2003 on Permission to Land. He sounds fabulous. You've got Dan Hawkins, his younger brother, on guitar and background vocals. Sounds fantastic. Dan is a great, great singer, great musician. Absolutely wonderful. Love the guy. He's just got a great attitude. He's a big fan of Thin Lizzy. He's amazing. You got longtime bass player, background singer Frankie Poulian, who's on this album. Frankie is absolutely fantastic. And the drummer they've had for their last 3 albums is none other than Rufus Tiger Taylor. Who's that, you may say? He's the son of Roger Taylor of Queen. Okay? So a band that loves Queen and worships at the feet of Queen, their drummer, Roger Taylor's son, Rufus, is in the darkness. It doesn't get any better than that, folks. And he's a fabulous drummer. He's unbelievable. All 4 of them are just wonderful musicians, and certainly Justin with singing and the others with background singing. It makes for a great mix, a fabulous team right here. I'm telling you, folks. Now, people may say, well, is anything ever going to match Permission to Land, though? Is anything going to be, you may say that they may never do anything that matches that album again. But I'm going to tell you something right now. This album right here, Motorheart, comes the closest. And I love all their albums. And I said there's 2 I have to give another chance to. But I have 5 of their albums, and I love every one of them. But I'm going to tell you right now, this comes the closest to matching Permission to Land as far as, oh boy, a band that, just brings it all. Brings the musicianship, brings the songwriting, brings the fun, the hooks, the melodies, the playing. It's all right here, folks. If you love Permission to Land, you're going to love Motorheart. Let me tell you. Here's a band that knows how to make something their own. They take their fandom, their love of bands like the Beatles, Queen, Aerosmith, AC/DC, a dash of Cheap Trick, okay? That's okay with me because they make it their own. They make this their own sound, their own wonderful music, but it resonates with people like me. Let me tell you, folks, this stuff is great. So I'm going to tell you, you need to check out Motorheart, folks. You really do. If you're into some groovy, heavy rock and roll that's just fun, more than anything, this is a fun rocking album. You need this. You need to get Motorheart by the Darkness. Folks, I am here to promote this and give it my highest recommendation on the Matt Street channel. There's the guys right there. All right? Check out Motorheart, folks, by the Darkness. If you haven't listened to the Darkness in a while, because after that first or second album or so, you kind of drifted away from them, do yourself a big favor. Come back to them, because I'm telling you, they're fabulous. And this album, Motorheart, this brings it all home again, folks. They're back in a big major way. And they're going to be coming around in the spring for a tour of the United States. I'm going to be there. I am going. They're coming to Boston. I'm going to be there. Folks, Motorheart, The Darkness. Give it a chance. Highest recommendation from the Matt Street channel in a while. Love you all. Get heavy. Get metal. Get fun. Get The Darkness. Love you all. Bye-bye.